I'm part of the Vancouver Startup Week team. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're grateful to be virtually gathered on Indigenous land, regardless of where you're joining us from this morning. I'm grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people. I'm privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. First off, I'd like to thank you for joining us for VSW 2021, and welcome to this morning's session, BC's Emerging Martech Scene, hosted by Switchboard PR. This session is part of our VSW Founder Track and is proudly supported by Sage Accounting. Sage knows that you didn't start your business to become an accountant. Sorry for any of those that are in our attendance today. Sage Accounting keeps your business organized and running smoothly. Track your cash flow, send out invoices, and get paid quickly. Visit the Sage Accounting booth to access free guides and templates to start your business finances right away and to get an exclusive VSW discount if you're finally ready to switch from Excel. I also want to take a moment to thank Switchboard for being our event partner and also our diamond sponsor. VSW could not happen without the continuous support of our community sponsors. During this session, if you have any questions for our speakers, please be sure to post them in the Q&A in the Whova platform. You can upvote your questions and we'll ensure that they're incorporated as part of our question and answer period at the end. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone over to our moderator, Megan Simpson, and we'll begin. Over to you, Megan.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And welcome. That was a great intro. Really excited to chat here today about BC's emerging Martech or marketing tech scene, and we have a great group of people here to do it. So quick intro to everyone. We have Mike Chang, CEO and co-founder of Lumen 5. We have Neve Cunningham, CEO of Rival Technologies, COO, I said in case that sounded like CEO. And we have Vinny Varma, co-founder and CEO of Creator Co. So before we dive into all the fun details, I want to give all of our panelists just a brief chance to intro a little bit more about themselves and what they're doing at their companies. So Neve, why don't we kick it off with you?
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so my name is Neve Cunningham. I'm COO. I'm one of the founding partners at Rival Technologies. Rival Technologies has built a market research platform that allows brands to connect with their customers, to get feedback, and also to engage them. We do a lot of real-time, in-the-moment research as well, and just generally allows brands to have a better relationship with their customers in this digital age.
Yeah,
that's me.
Sounds good. Vinny.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. So my name is Vinod Varma. Friends call me Vinny and V. I'm the CEO of Creator, and we help brands essentially scale and automate their influencer campaigns, connecting them with micro influencers who ultimately drive awareness, build trust, a lot of UGC, and on the long tail help boost their sales.
All right, and that leaves last but not least, Mike.
Thank you, Megan. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Michael. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Lumen 5. We're a video creation platform, and the originating vision was PowerPoint makes making presentations so easy, but why is video creation so hard? So we made Lumen 5 so that anyone without video editing experience can easily create video content, and we primarily focus on helping marketing and communications teams to be able to create video content, thought leadership content, industry expert contents for distribution across social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and so forth.
Awesome. So one thing that I find really interesting about marketing tech, and I feel like you all in your companies are such a great representation of this, is it's such a diverse vertical. It's such a diverse kind of sector. There's so many things that encompassed within it, right? Content, customer experience, advertising, marketing, data, analytics. So it's really interesting. I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion today between all three of you. And when we're looking at BC specifically, we've seen, BC home to a lot of major Canadian MarTech companies. You look at the likes of Hootsuite, Unbound, Alita, formerly Vision Critical, which was founded out of Vancouver. So, that takes me to the first question. I'll direct it to you, Vinny. How have you seen, have these companies in BC really helped create the Martech scene in the province, and how have you seen it evolve over the years?
Yeah, I think to some of the founders in the space, definitely looking up to some of the larger companies who have established themselves on a global scale is really motivating, and it's great to see. And I think it opens up opportunity for other founders and other creative companies to come in and start their roots here and really kind of understand that this is a great startup hub, and there is opportunity in the Martech scene, and there are active investors, great founders who ultimately can make great advisors. Yeah, I think the startup culture, particularly in the Martech space here, is strong. And then you've got new emergers like Slack that are killing it, and it's great to see.
Mm-hmm. How have you felt that that's affected creators' growth and your decision to be kind of based in BC?
Yeah, it was Creator, also has some roots in San Francisco, which is interesting. But yeah, Vancouver's been amazing. Great group. I mean, Neve's CEO is an advisor to our company, who's co-founded Vision Critical. And we've got a couple of the co-founders from Hootsuite on our team as well. So I mean, the mentorship and ultimately the community leadership around the Martech scene here is really strong, and I think it's really helped Creator really kind of bring in all of these intelligent individuals who have done it before and really helped accelerate our growth and talk about in different things that ultimately help our company grow and be better. So it's nice to have the contribution and the people here.
Right. Mike, you founded a number of startups kind of within the marketing tech space over the last 8 years. Are you surprised to see that BC is this hub for marketing?
I'm not surprised anymore. I was probably surprised, 12 years ago. Wasn't really something I was thinking about at the time, but in retrospect, looking back, I feel like there's a bit of East Coast, West Coast energies at play. And you look at what East Coast typically is known for, not even in Canada, but Wall Street, finance, and you've got a lot of the banking headquarters even over in Toronto. Then you've got West Coast, you've got LA, San Francisco, and a lot of that creative energy gets influenced and expressed on the West Coast here in Vancouver as well. And I fundamentally view the marketing side, so Martech obviously comprises of both marketing and technology. Though the marketing side is a very creative expression in the business world, and marketing is often the Wild West. Is a bit more of that cowboy mentality. There's not a lot of regulations. There's not a lot of boundaries as you see in finance. So it's a realm for exploration and risk taking. And I see, one of the reasons why Lumen 5 feels right at home in Vancouver is because of that. We are building something that hasn't really existed before. It's this marriage of art and science. It's building technology for video creation, which is both a technical aspiration, but also a very creative expression of technology. So it's something that I've seen grow over the years. And it's everything from the very early days where Vancouver just had a very high concentration of creative agencies, film agencies, gaming studios. And a lot of that, I think, has influenced how the tech ecosystem has formed over the past decade.
Me would really be interested to get your thoughts as well. Where do you feel we are now? This panel is about the emerging BC Martech space, but there obviously, as we're talking about, there is some history here. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was formerly at Vision Critical, and my CEO of Rival was also the founder of Vision Critical. And for me, yes, it is very much an emerging space. We're seeing loads of really great new players come onto the market, but there are some firmly established companies who've been around for a long time, like Hootsuite, Vision Critical, now Alida. And what's great about that from a BC perspective is that we have this amazing talent pool. So we have a lot of people who've been there, done it, who have experience in the industry, who are bringing their expertise, but we're also combining it with a lot of recent grads. As Mike was mentioning, there's a lot of university programs on the West Coast that are very much that dichotomy of tech, but also creative. And so it creates this amazing talent pool of graduates as well. So I feel we're really nicely placed in BC to have that experience from people who've done it for many years, but combining it with like fresh, creative people coming out of college as well. So it's a really great time to be in BC working in the Martech space.
I'd be really interested to understand how each of your guys' companies has kind of optimized on a lot of the stuff you're talking about, the advantages that BC has when it comes to marketing tech, and maybe advice you would also have for other companies who are looking to take advantage of that as well. Benny, why don't we start with you for that one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, I think the biggest, we're, a 3-year-old company this year. So for us, I think the early mentorship of people, like Andrew and like Dario and some of the other people who have, founded some of the companies that you guys are talking about, I think that was surrounding ourselves and bringing them closer to us really helped us, I think, probably avoid some mistakes that they've probably experienced. And just, if I had any advice, I think it would be, there are a lot of really talented, experienced Martech leaders here in BC. And if I was going to give any advice, I'd say, find them, pitch them on the vision, and get them on your team, because that advice, those connections, that support is really invaluable. Martech doesn't. You don't open a Martech company and think about BC. You're thinking nationally and globally. So, having top tier talent, you're always going to have that market opportunity, I guess, or that's, typically what you're aiming for. So finding people who have been there or are going there and surrounding yourself with them is to me, I think probably some of the most valuable advice I would give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me or Mike, feel free to jump in.
Canadians are too polite to jump in.
There you go.
If she wasn't saying my name, we just all probably be staring at each other.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Vinod says, and I think the emerging scene is nice because it's not at the extreme early stages of emerging. There's this layer of companies that have formed, and some of which we talked about, like Hootsuite and Vision Critical. Like I met Dario at the very beginning of my journey, around the time when I first started Lumen 5. That's when I met Dario. Been on and off Zoom calls with Ryan Holmes a number of times just to pick his brain on what was the journey like building Hootsuite. And building a marketing tech company is fundamentally just very different than if you were building a dating app or Airbnb. And it's just that the whole experience, the whole roadblock journey is very different. But maybe shifting gears a little bit, because I think we've talked a bit about how some of the leaders in Martech have helped form the foundation of what it's like to build a Martech company in Vancouver. The talent side is something that we've always been really fascinated by, this creative talent pool. And I think a lot of times when starting a tech company, the most natural thing to do is to go hire from the tech industry. But how do you hire from an emerging industry where a lot of this stuff is still developing? And one of the ways we've leveraged that, I guess you could say, is hire from cross industries. And I've always strongly believed that innovation lies in the intersection of different fields, and that's where you really get creative ideas. In the example that I gave earlier, Vancouver is a very strong design scene, creative agency scene. There's a film scene. There's a whole world of creative professionals out there. And being a company like ours, where we have a strong design presence, but also a strong technology presence, we look to a lot of these animation studios for both their technical talents and also their creative talent as well. And if you look at, let's say, an animation studio, a lot of the talent there are highly technical. They're engineers who are building animation tools to be able to empower their creative artists to be able to produce animations. And those are all very interesting skills that we don't immediately associate in the tech world. But we've also found that when we hire from other industries, they come in with fresh eyes, with a breath of fresh air, and be able to look at a problem differently and approach it from many of the things that they've learned from a completely different industry. So one thing I always recommend for businesses in BC in particular is to look at some of these other industries where we're really strong, where there's incredible talents. And what does it look like when you bring them over into the world of tech and startups?
Yeah, well put.
Yeah, I'll just acknowledge, it seems like we have just lost Neve. I know she was in a bit of a location that didn't have the best internet technology, so hopefully she will be hopping back on, but we'll continue without her for now. Yeah, I think that's a really solid point, Mike. And I think, you've mentioned this before as well, just some of the interns coming out as well as like SFU and UBC is something that you guys have also utilized and used. I think it was really interesting, to talk about this idea of like BC is this also creative hub for entertainment and all this stuff and how that plays into the marketing space, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And touching on the school point a little bit, like I went to school in the early days when SFU first formed the Interactive Arts and Technology program. And that in and of itself was a mouthful. And at the time when I was telling friends and family that I was going to study interactive arts and technology, it's like, well, what is that? Why is it business? Is it finance? Is it arts? And it's neither or all of those things. It's new media. And there's an emerging education sector as well around these topics of creative expressions of technology. So I've over the years, I've seen not only SFU embrace that, but UBC, BCIT, and many of the colleges and transformed into universities now have new educational programs in this world of new media, in this world of creative technology. And creative technology in isolation is kind of a confusing term, but applied to the business world is often Martech. And that's again, going back to the idea that it's one of the most creative departments within business. So it lends itself very naturally to new media.
Right. Well, Neve, glad to have you back.
Sorry, a little bit of connectivity issues there, but hopefully you can hear me and see me now.
Yeah, we can hear you and see you, so that's great. To welcome you back, why don't we kind of shift gears a little bit, and why don't you tell us a bit about why you might think the Martech space is ripe for disruption and how Rival might fit into that?
Yeah, I mean, Rival in particular has been exceptionally lucky, even in the last 4.5 years since Rival has started. We've seen some big acquisitions and some really high market cap in the space. So Qualtrics was acquired by SAP for 8 billion. They IPO'd for well over 20 billion. We have Medallia that has a market cap of 6 billion. And although, of course, we're very focused on the BC tech space, we're a global company, we're looking internationally. So Rival feels like it's in an exceptional position to break into this market, which quite frankly is very traditional. It's really ripe for disruption. There's a lot of opportunity to innovate and to kind of move away from the very traditional methodologies that people have been using. And I think just in general, this space, it's crying out for something new and exciting. People want to connect with brands. They have a lot to say, but when you think about it, nobody wants to take a survey. And so what you really have to do is try and bridge that gap between the way people live their digital lives and the way people actually want to communicate to brands. And so the more that we kind of mirror it, like talking to your friends and family, having the conversations happen on mobile, it really allows us to be more relevant. And at the end of the day, Martech has to be relevant. Like in order to cut through the noise, because there's so much going on, you really have to think about, okay, well, who are these end people? Who are our target audience? How do they think? And so really trying to be at the cutting edge of all of that will put companies in a really great position to be able to disrupt.
Yeah. And Vinod, you look at that kind of from the creator space as well. So talk to me about that from your perspective.
Yeah, influencer marketing has been around for a while, and it started from before Michael Jordan joined Nike. Where we're seeing it go though is interesting in just the sense that it's not necessarily the celebrity anymore that's in charge of that purchase decision. Millennials and Gen Y shoppers are a little bit more savvy than that. They see through some of those relationships. And they are looking to trust their friends. It's the people next to them. It's the people that they follow and like and engage with on a regular basis. And we're kind of capitalizing on that space. And what we're seeing, especially with COVID, is kind of this emergence of the creator economy, where these individuals are really becoming their own storefronts in a sense, and they're collaborating with multiple brands that all fit within what they enjoy talking about and what their audience is receptive to. But it provides brands this amazing opportunity to push their products through these new channels into these new communities and really grow their customer base and build that trust and humanize their brands. And that's kind of where Creator is headed, is kind of that empowering individuals and people to become their own storefronts through marketing tech and connecting with Shopify and WooCommerce and some of the leading digital storefronts out there, and bridging the connection between the brands that run those stores and then the individuals that are already purchasing and talking about the product. And now we're just providing a monetization engine in the middle.
Right. I think you brought up a really good point within that as well, is the effects of COVID. And as much as I'm sure you guys like myself are all very, and everyone on this, listening to this is probably very tired of talking about COVID and its effects. I feel like if we're talking about the emerging BC tech marketing tech scene, and we're talking about disruption, it being ripe for disruption, I feel like we can't not talk about COVID. So how has COVID affected each of your companies and the marketing tech space from each of your perspectives?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I don't think anyone would like to say that COVID has been a positive. However, I think for the Martech space in particular, it has forced a lot of people to go online. There was a quote from the CEO of Microsoft who said that COVID has basically expedited people's digital strategies by at least 5 years. And so for us in particular at Rival, because what we do is all online, because a lot of traditional research actually happens offline, everyone has had to reimagine how they do research. So that has been a positive shift for us. The other thing that is quite significant is that brands and customers can no longer rely on historical data because things have just changed so much. So attitudes and behaviors that held true in the past have now changed. And so people really have to go back out and try and understand their customers. They have to be closer to them than ever before. And so the connected customer is a really important aspect of the Martech world, and one that because of COVID, brands have to just be more connected and understand them better now because their behavior has changed. And so they need to be able to map that patterns.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think for us in particular, again, to what Niamh was saying is like, I don't think anyone is like, yay COVID, but it was interesting for us because we definitely experienced the stab of it, I guess you can say, and we were, fortunate enough to do a quick pivot and kind of recover and end the year on a high note. But a lot of in our early days, one of our strategies was kind of going after a customer group that no one in our space was really going after in a big way. So we found a lot of success with salons and restaurants and kind of service, Broadway across Canada and some of these entertainment and service focused brands. And that kind of evaporated overnight for us. So we had to do, a big pivot, and that hence our focus now more on Shopify and e-com enabled brands. So we were able to shift and move in a different direction, and it's, kept the same overall model. So it worked, but definitely, it's interesting. Those are times where you need to bring your company together and navigate those waters as a team. And I think Martech or otherwise, I think, yeah, definitely was a little shake.
I definitely think Martech's one of those industries that really thrive in times of change, and COVID was certainly a time of change. It's changing of consumer behaviors, it's changing of how we make purchasing decisions. Contextually for us at Lumen 5, we were always about creating a video creation solution for businesses to be able to create video content, but not every business creates video content or cares about video content. Many of them rely heavily on print marketing, on event marketing. And when COVID hit, much of that went away. And so as Niamh was saying earlier, the acceleration of digital strategies in our context was that people stopped looking to print and events marketing and really focused on what is the digital version of content? Do we publish more blog posts? Do we publish more infographics? And one of the winners around that time was, well, video was where the web was headed. You go on Facebook, you go on LinkedIn, you go on Twitter, and it's really video content all over the place. And there's lots of examples of successful brands that have really embraced video content. And so we became kind of a center of attention for a lot of these companies who are looking to figure out how to communicate digitally, and specifically how to do that using video as the format to do so. And so that was an interesting time, but we also saw the double-edged sword of that. As Vinny was saying earlier, we also had many customers who are small businesses, who are your neighborhood barbershops, tattoo artists, and restaurants who use video to promote their neighborhood services. And when those businesses went under, they weren't looking to communicate digitally. They weren't operating at all. And so there had to be a shift in focus for us. And over the past year, we've seen a stronger traction, especially revenue traction with mid-market and enterprise customers who had the revenue to shift their strategies into a digital video one, whereas small businesses, we're starting to see them come back, which is great. But there was certainly a dip near the beginning. We run a freemium model, which means we saw a spike in free usage, but converting the free users into paying customers was difficult at the beginning of the pandemic when many of the businesses were struggling. So that's what we've seen with COVID.
Right. Yeah, it's it's so interesting, and being at BetaKit and just tracking Canada's startups, it's a really common story where beginning of March there was a lot of uncertainty. People didn't want to do things like maybe marketing spend, or it was on hold, and then everything started to ramp back up. And so it's a very common thread and theme that I've seen throughout the past year and a bit. And it's really interesting for you guys to talk about how COVID affected each of your companies. I think I'm curious at a higher level as well. Niamh, you talked a little bit about how there's been an acceleration of almost like 5 years, right? So where do you guys see the broader, marketing tech scene, whether you want to talk about it broadly in Canada or in BC? How much has the pandemic actually accelerated it in each of your views?
Do you want to go, Niamh?
No, you go first. Yeah.
Always polite.
I think Niamh's quote or Satya's quote really nailed it. I think people are realizing that the opportunity digitally is bigger regardless of where your target market is. There's just more and more people going online and mobile enabled. So I think it's a good thing for the industry. I think it's only going to get bigger, to be honest. As you look at more recent companies like even BBTV, that's maybe hovering on that in the fringe of Martech, that are all emerging, and I think that the industry in general, Martech, is probably ripe for a little bit of consolidation. I think that there's an opportunity for startups and companies that have some innovative technology to kind of to be viewed as really strong acquisition partners. So I think the industry is going to get bigger, and with that, there will be a few people or some companies focused on consolidating the space. And so I think there's opportunity for founders for sure.
Yeah, and from Rival's perspective as well. So of course, everything going online was amazing in terms of, for us, it was able to expedite our digital strategy, and people, all brands, regardless of their size, are now online, while before there was a bit of resistance. Another thing though, is we had a lot of success in the early days with doing in the moment research. So live at events, at the Canuck Stadium, you could actually be live, giving feedback on the game. At the NFL draft, we had people, while the draft was happening live in Philadelphia, they were telling them about the event. All of that was impacted by COVID. That's all starting to slowly open back up again. So I think that the Martech at events has a huge opportunity that was probably somewhat quashed over the last, well, it wasn't somewhat, it was definitely quashed over the last 12 months. So we'll start to see that coming back online as well. And I think that will have a lot of positive impact for the Martech space as well.
Yeah, I fully agree with all of those sentiments. I think it's one of those scenarios where all the new digital strategies are here to stay. They're not just going to vanish overnight after COVID, yet at the same time, some of the old strategies come back. And so Martech sees this compounding effects where the more marketing strategies there are, the more diversity there is in how we reach our customers, the more opportunities there are in the Martech space for not just existing companies, but also new companies to emerge. Even take this conference, for example. This is a very unique experience for me anyway, to be able to be on Zoom and then somehow be able to speak to an audience. And it creates very unique interactions where you've got let's say an investor from Toronto or even in the States who otherwise wouldn't normally fly to Vancouver Startup Week, but now can be there and see all these startups that the city has to offer. And those are interesting dynamics that I don't think goes away. Like, I don't think there is a world in which where Vancouver Startup Week after COVID says, okay, we no longer want to welcome international visitors. We're going to bring everything local. There's always going to be this remote component to welcome that international audience. And I think we're seeing that on a business level as well, is after you've done business internationally and digitally, why would you then go back? And while you will reinvest in events and some of the physical strategies that really worked before, what we've picked up over the past 12 months never really goes away. So that compounding effects is something that I'm really excited about. I think Martech will play a huge role in helping businesses come out of COVID, and not just helping them adapt to COVID, but then helping them adapt out of COVID, because that's going to be a journey as well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about even just this panel that we're on, I think I've done so many virtual panels now. When we go back in person, I don't even know if I'm going to know how to moderate in person panels. So we'll see. I think just threading it through, talking about BC particularly with everything, you guys have mentioned earlier, the emerging tech talent, the companies like Hootsuite, Alita, that are already here. How does, if this scene, is this emerging scene that we're talking about, how does the Martech scene here in BC optimize on, this experience over the past year we've had with the pandemic? Neve?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly as Mike was talking about. It's if you want to really capitalize on it, you now have to recognize that there's multiple different opportunities, both offline and online. So offline with events, but they still have a huge Martech component to them. And then online, of course, for all of the reasons that we spoke about. I think with any industry where you have an opportunity to be exceptionally innovative, like we were talking about this last week when we were all chatting as a group together, the financial services space, or the healthcare space, your main job in those industries is error prevention. It's to make sure that people don't die, people don't lose money, millions of dollars doesn't go missing overnight. When you're in the Martech and any kind of creative industry, you really need to fully embrace innovation. And you need to recognize that to innovate and to stay ahead of your competition, you have to keep innovating. You're going to fail. You have to fail. You've got to learn your lesson. You got to move on. But if you're not trying, and you're not innovating, then you're definitely going to fail. So I think that we're really lucky in this space to have that opportunity to be able to innovate, to be able to take risks, and to be able to kind of, if they don't work out, to quickly pivot and move on. And I think that now more than ever, the Martech space has to fully embrace that. And as we're coming out of these old patterns and there's new emerging patterns, it's an opportunity for everyone to kind of take a step back, look at the lay of the land, and see where are the opportunities, and to innovate and to spot them are the people who are going to do really well.
Yeah, I echo the sentiment for sure. I think there's I'm sure most people know, but there's something called dev sprints where you're working on something very, very quickly to execute and see if it works. I feel like this was the year of like operational and Martech sprints. Like it was like pivot a little bit here, come back, go this way, go right. So it is, it's fun because you get to be creative. COVID, put some, definitely, took away from some of that fun. But, it is about people who can innovate, quickly execute, and learn from that, whether it's something, it is working and there's tweaks to be made, or it's definitely not going to work and you need to stop and put it down and rethink your strategy. I think that Martech gives, companies the ability to do that and the freedom, and we're not, although we have our own stresses and stuff, we're not worried about, people getting sued, dying, and losing money. So from that aspect, we can kind of breathe, and that I think embeds a bit of a fun culture into a lot of these companies, where it is, work hard, play hard. But and innovation and creativity is definitely rewarded here.
Yeah, and continuing on the theme of speed of execution and just being nimble, I think as companies explore these digital landscapes, the game is different on the internet. If your strategies are primarily, let's say, an annual conference, there's a certain level of stability and steadiness to here's how we run a conference, here's the playbook, here's how we secure a venue. People show up, they line up here at tables. There's mostly a playbook for how events and conferences are run. Now on the web, it's a bit of a wild west. You've got Instagram, which used to be square posts, and then suddenly they introduced stories, which are now vertical. They disappear after 24 hours. Oh, now there's TikTok, and TikTok has all these crazy filters, and almost every quarter there are new rules being written on the internet and constantly being rewritten. And going back to Neve's point earlier from a different conversation, marketing is about staying relevant, and being able to stay relevant is dependent on how rapidly changing the circumstances are. And the web is one of those places where the circumstances are constantly changing. And to stay relevant in such a constant stream of change requires marketing technologies. And that's where I think BC has really landed in a really good spot, is whether it's because of our education or because of the people that the city attracts, we tend to have a very fast-moving, fast-thinking culture. And the companies that are started here tend to move very quickly, move on decisions, ship products, and it's just a very West Coast hacky mentality that Vinny was talking about earlier, this influence of devs in San Francisco and this idea of move fast, break things. Those are all very very core to the Vancouver and BC DNA.
Yeah, I think those are all really solid points. I'm just going to take the moment to remind our audience that you are able to send in some questions if you guys want to, and we'll try to get those answered at the end. So just a reminder there. So for our panelists, so, you know, when we talk about this emerging BC Martech landscape as we've been doing, I think, you know, we've talked a little bit about talent, but another thing that's really important to any landscape and success is investment as well. So I'm really curious to get what each of your experience has been like in the investment landscape when it comes to each of your companies in the Martech space. And if you feel like there is enough support, you know, in Canada and in BC, I think one of the things that we really have noticed and tracked at BetaKit is there obviously is early stage gaps when it comes to funding or infrastructure support in BC, and it can be said for other regions in Canada as well. So we would be really interested to get each of your experiences with the investment landscape and if you are feeling like there is enough support there. Why don't I throw it to, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate at Rival Technologies because our CEO and founder founded Vision Critical, Alita, so obviously very well connected, and we had a lot of great investment early on. But yeah, I'm even seeing it, like if you look kind of at the broader space, I saw that Dooley did their Series A, they got 20 million, they just did a Series B, they got 80 million. I mean, the money that seems to be going around right now, actually, if anything, is almost troubling because I'm afraid it's a bubble. But I do feel as if there's a lot of investment out there. I do think, to Mike's point, you have to really make sure that you get the right ears and that you're able to pitch your idea and you're really able to sell someone on your vision. And I think just exploring the networks in general and having mentors that are also well connected definitely helps with that. And so you do really, really have to network. But I think that we are in a very fortunate position right now because people have big checkbooks and they seem to be willing to write them. And BC Tech has been a real success story over the last 5 years. Like if you look at Slack, if you look at Clio, if you look at Galvanize, I think that people are really appreciate just the quality of BC Tech and the businesses that are being grown here, and they're willing to continue to invest. That at least has been our experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think COVID was a bit of a everyone hunker down and see what's going to happen. But you know, since then, there's been a ton of funding in the space. I think it is important as a younger company to make sure you have, to Neve's point, your vision dialed in, and being able to communicate that effectively, you know, within a 10 to 15 minute window is really important to get that buy-in. And I think there is enough, you know, going back to our earlier questions, there is enough diversity in the BC ecosystem here where you will be able to find other successful entrepreneurs, companies, advisors, founders who believe in your vision. So I think it's a matter of, you know, dialing your vision in, staying true to it if you believe that there's something there, and then finding and enrolling those who share that or believe in the story. I think you know the money will come, but the story and the vision is important.
I think from my perspective, there's two ways to tackle this conversation. One is the ability for BC-based companies to access capital, any capital from anywhere in the world. And then there's the BC investment ecosystem, which is homegrown investors that are directly from BC. One of the interesting things that I've observed over the years is, you know, if you rewind 10 years ago, it was fairly common that an investor wouldn't invest in a company unless they can meet with you regularly. And I remember meeting investors that have specific streets, like if you're north of this street or south of this street, this is my thesis. I invest in companies in this area because I can't have an impact outside of them. And over the decade, I think this belief and observation was mostly solidified through my experience at C100 24 Hours in the Valley, you know, maybe 3 years ago, where the Valley was really actively trying to dispel this myth that Silicon Valley only invests in Silicon Valley, that many of the VCs in the Valley are looking beyond. They're looking to invest internationally. They're looking at Israel. They're looking at India. They're looking at Canada, of course. And so I think the investment community, even pre-COVID, was becoming much more internationalized and realizing that there are startups outside of the Valley, which is something that I guess most of us outside of the Valley realized before the Valley did. And that created a whole trend where the Valley started to prove that you can invest outside of the Valley. And it became kind of an inspiration for investors around the world to say, oh, if the Valley's investing outside of the Valley and they're investing in Israel and India and Canada, then they can do it too. So you've got a bit more of an international investment community now. I was just looking at who led Dooley's round, and it seems like they're more of a New York VC. And so you've got East Coast investing in West Coast investing in East Coast, cross countries around the globe. So I think VC companies' access to capital is in a better place than ever before. COVID accelerated that in many ways. We were talking about how, from a business perspective, strategies were going digital. Well, from an investment perspective, that's also true too. Investors learning to work with their founders over Zoom and being able to deliver value digitally was one of those fundamental shifts that, again, I don't think will just go back. Investors have figured out how to invest internationally. That's a massive opportunity for them. Now, on the flip side, the other side of that conversation, I do think that the investment community in BC is an emerging scene, but it's a very, very powerful and a fast emerging scene. There's more BC homegrown investors than ever before. And I think that's riding on the success of some of the companies that you talked about before. When you get a company like Hootsuite and the Vision Critical find success here in the city, it attracts investors to start their own firms. It attracts angels. It attracts perhaps East Coast investors to relocate or at least start an office here in the West Coast. So I think the funding ecosystem is better than it's ever been. And I think it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, another observation as well I made, because I did a talk for Product BC last week on the gender imbalance in the tech space. And so one of the things that I'm definitely starting to realize is that there's a huge wave of investors who are willing to invest in women-led companies. So companies that have female co-founders or the majority of the leaders in the company are women. And one of the funds that we were talking to over at Rival was the BDC Women in Tech Fund, which is primarily aimed at funding businesses that have female founders. And it's great just to see initiatives like that actually taking off, and hopefully more will start to follow suit. But there really is something out there for everyone. You just really have to do your research.
I do feel responsible for adding 1 point for all the bootstrappers out there. Lumen 5 is a bootstrap business. So here we're talking about the funding ecosystem. I obviously pay attention to that scene. We haven't fundraised ourselves, and we've grown just fine without it. We're a 40-person company and continuing to grow aggressively. So what I love about the Martech scene, and I think the Martech scene implied within that is often in the B2B umbrella. Very rarely do you refer to Martech as selling to consumers. Marketing is a department that exists in a business context. And I think one of the more interesting things and what attracts me to the B2B space is in B2B, you tend to be able to generate revenue. Whereas in B2C, let's say you're building a WhatsApp or Instagram even, generating even $1 from your consumers is very difficult. And so what you need is this scale to be able to be able to build a business model around hundreds of millions of users. And that requires a ton of funding to get to that critical mass. But in the world of B2B, where you build something, you sell it to the person, they pay you, and you can use that revenue, and it becomes a bit of a snowball. So I think Martech in particular and B2B in particular creates a lot of opportunities for those out there who are not interested in fundraising. There's a strong ecosystem for that here as well. And many of the companies here either bootstrapped much of their path, much of their journeys, or raised very little capital. Unbounce is one of those, Later is one of those. And there's a lot of examples in Vancouver, although many of them have raised funding. But if you look at the proportion of the amount of money that they've raised, there's a very healthy ecosystem for business people, startup people who are looking to bootstrap their companies.
Yeah, we have this expression, it's like other people's money. In many ways, if you start bootstrapping early on, you're forced to run a lean operation. You don't overhire and then have to do redundancies. So there's a lot to be said for bootstrapping and just really running a lean team and only taking funding when you absolutely need it.
Yeah, I think, those are really all very great points, I think, for the audience. And, back to your point, Mike, a little bit, I want to pull this in. You've talked about also, and again, acknowledging the, importance of bootstrapping as well, but you did make a point about how there's a lot of like major companies coming into BC or particularly Vancouver right now, and that can help with an investment community, but that can also help with talent. And we've talked a little bit about talent already, but would really like to dive in with each of you about how maybe you feel companies like, they might not be in the marketing tech space specifically, but like Microsoft, like, Shopify creating even a bigger presence in Vancouver. How does big companies coming in affect talent when you guys are looking for it? Vinod, would you want to start us off? Or Mike, there you go.
I was going to say, I rarely start first, so I can take a stab at it.
Yeah, no, start first. I liked your sentiment the last time we chatted.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share. So I'm personally really excited. I think depending on who you talk to, there's a mix of excitement and anxiety. What does it mean? Obviously, these companies tend to pay more than many of us and what we can afford. And so it will be competitive, undoubtedly, in the short term. But when I look at landscapes and ecosystems, I think a bit more long-term, and I think there's a lot of long-term benefits to these companies coming in. Think of these as acceleration programs for talent. They're almost the universities. People tend to join big, massive companies. They tend to work 2 to 3 years just to learn what it's like to work in scale, and then they tend to leave and they hunger for this kind of impact. And a lot of what I think about is there's a certain type of individual who wants to work for a startup, and it's not for everyone. And the types of people who want to work for startups will often end up in a startup, even if they spend a couple of years in these big companies. I think one of the challenges of building a talent pool and an emerging talent pool is that it's hard to scale to a point where nobody has seen before. And so if nobody in your company has worked in a 500-person company, you're trying to become a 500-person company, it can be quite a difficult and ambiguous journey. And it can be hugely beneficial to have just a few team members of your team who says, oh, I've spent a couple of years at Microsoft. Here's how we run this process. Here's how we do this at scale. And that's what I'm really excited about. I also think once you have these hubs and headquarters, it starts to attract relocation. Very rarely, it does happen, but very rarely do people relocate for a small company, pick up their families and move their entire livelihood to a new city. That tends to require a lot of stability for people to be willing to do that. And I think with companies like Microsoft being here, that will encourage relocation of talent outside of BC into BC. And then likewise, after they're familiarized with the province and the city, a couple of years, they want to have a bigger impact. They leave the big corporations and they join a startup. So I'm really excited for what big companies coming to BC could mean for our talent ecosystem.
Yeah, I really liked your chatting with you about this last week. Is I think that, to his point, although there is a risk to startups like ourselves, losing groomed talent or younger talent to bigger paychecks at bigger companies. I also think that it could be reciprocal in the sense that once I can only speak for myself, but I did work for a $1 billion company, and sometimes you just kind of get sick of it and want to do something on your own, or want to join a smaller team that's more purpose and mission driven, and you feel like you have some autonomy or skin in the game. So I think it goes both ways. To your point, you're going to lose some people who want more experience and bigger paychecks and so forth, and good for them. They deserve it. And you're also going to get these people who have seen, lived, and breathed these larger billion-dollar cultures, and want to change or want to support or join a team and have more autonomy in a business. And so I think it could be reciprocal. And one thing's for sure is having those larger anchor tenants here gives a reason for the talent that's developing here a reason to stay and not have to go elsewhere if they choose to want to go and pursue working for a public or a larger billion-dollar company. So I think in the long run it's healthy, but there is definitely a bit of a risk, and I think it's about balancing attracting people outside of the province maybe to come in. Obviously, Vancouver is a beautiful place to live, and setting down roots here and offering their talents to not only the Amazons and Deloittes and larger Teluses of the world, but to also companies like ours that are in high growth mode.
Yeah, and I think for those who don't already know, I live in Toronto, so I'm actually in Ontario, but I've actually had my brother-in-law, his startup decided to build out in Vancouver, and really young startup. And now my brother-in-law, my sister have moved out to Vancouver right now. They're in Vancouver, and I'm just sitting here all jealous in Toronto's lockdown, watching them go on like hikes on the weekends and stuff like that. So yeah, a really interesting point about just even though we're in this remote world, what being in a place like Vancouver could give you. Niamh, I know, sorry, you're going in and out here. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I had to try and reconnect to the Wi-Fi, but I'm back. So hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone made really great points. Initially, I think we all felt very threatened and a little bit afraid. Are we going to lose all of our top talent to these massive tech giants? But I think Mike makes a really good point, just that in some ways they're training them. So that's pretty great for all of us in the long run. The other thing as well is that, with distributed teams now, we can just start to look further afield. And while previously we pretty much had most people coming into the office and all of our developers are in the office, now we recognize that, there's such a great talent pool globally. And so we're starting to pick from that. And we've used some local companies like VanHack, and we've got some really great talent from India, from Brazil. And so it's kind of forced us to look outside as well, because we can't just be trying to pick everyone from this really competitive talent pool. And so it forced our hands, which felt uncomfortable at the start, but now I think we're better off for it. So I think all in all, as it's all playing out, it's actually a positive thing for the tech scene in general.
Mm-hmm. And when we spoke last week, Mike, you had a really good point. I think you've touched on it a little bit so far today, but you talked about how there's also this opportunity for, taking this creative talent in BC, in the area, and taking that into like the business and marketing side. How have you experienced that in the last little while? Do you feel like there's an opportunity there?
Yeah, I think so. And BC's creative economy is fascinating, and it's very fragmented. And you've got everything from game developers to film producers to wedding photographers. There's so many of these creative individuals out there. Some of whom might have gone through a school like SFU, many of whom didn't, and just saw Vancouver as a city that welcomed creative expression to be able to build their own freelance careers straight out of high school. And you've got all this talent. And what I found is that many of the pure creative individuals don't think of tech as a career path. They just don't associate themselves with the world of technology. Perhaps from the outside, the world of tech can be very intimidating, and you're thinking servers and programming and code. One thing that I've always seen is when you get in a room with a creative professional and you tell them about startups and tech, they light up and they go, "Oh, I love this stuff. That's exactly what I do. I had no idea that's what tech was all about." And I've always thoroughly enjoyed not only interviewing creative professionals, but also hiring them and watching them bring that creative energy into the team. And I remember even back very, very early days, we were in a co-working space. There was a wedding photographer, wedding videographer that just sat next to me. He was editing videos all day, and all he does is film weddings, and he's got this 8-hour footage. And here I am trying to create a platform that helps people make 30-second videos. And he was just fascinated by how he was using this very bulky After Effects, and it takes him 30 seconds to just launch the software. And then there we were working on something that was cloud-based, and everything's kind of instantaneous. And there was a lot of cross-pollination there. And he looks at an app like that and he goes, "Oh, here's what I would change. Here's what I would love. Here's what I don't like about After Effects." And those are the kinds of things that I don't think you really get elsewhere. I've also spent a number of years in Toronto and Berlin and Barcelona and just absorbing the startup ecosystems around the world. And every city has something unique that they offer. But Vancouver was really one of those cities where that creativity is felt thoroughly. And I think exploring what hiring looks like in those areas is going to take a bit more work than hiring from within tech. So for example, you want to hire in tech, maybe you put up a job posting on AngelList or something. Creative professionals aren't looking there. They're not going in these startups. They're not on Y Combinator's Hacker News looking for jobs. And so there's a bit of effort you need to go to go out of your way to understand Dribbble and Behance and the world of design and creativity, and understand how the resume just plays a different role in the creative world. It's about the portfolio and it's about the hands-on work that they've done. So while I think some behaviors need to change in terms of cross-pollination, it's usually very worthwhile, and the talent from cross industries tend to breed a lot of innovation within tech.
Neve, I feel like we've been going on a journey with you. We're like seeing everywhere where you are. I'm so interested.
I'm also fascinated because I thought Neve was using a Zoom background, and then she starts walking, and I was like, that's not a Zoom background.
Yeah, it's a blurred Zoom background, so you can see a little bit of it. I'm actually at Desolation Sound, and what you can't see is a beautiful scene of the water over here. And so we're right up at a place called Gorge Harbor, and I highly recommend it. Not for its Wi-Fi though. I do not recommend it for its Wi-Fi. I recommend it for its isolation and its beauty. So I've been running around a little bit, but hopefully the connection hasn't been too bad and you've been able to hear me.
No, it's all good. Yeah. Speaking of the beauty of BC, just a great example.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have 5 minutes left. So where I want to end this off is I really want to get each of yours outlooks on the future of Martech industry in BC, what you guys think that looks like based on COVID, everything we've kind of talked about. So if you're going to say, what's the future of Martech in BC? How do you guys view it?
Yeah, I would say the future of Martech in BC is extremely positive. We have so many creative people with amazing ideas and vision who are hardworking, and it's an industry that's poised for disruption because people just crave innovation, and it just attracts a great talent pool. And as we were mentioning, we don't know how long it's going to last, but there seems to be a lot of capital and investment available right now. So if you have a great idea, I say just get out there, start networking, start picking people's brains, start tapping your network. You'd be so surprised how approachable and amazing people are if you're willing to put yourself out there. So I say go find some mentors, find some people in the space, get your vision dialed, and go for it.
Yeah, totally. I think to echo that, the future is definitely bright in BC and Vancouver. You know, sidebar, we haven't raised a ton of money, kind of a hybrid between bootstrapping and raising, but all of the money we have raised has come from Vancouver, which is awesome. Yeah, to Neve's point, I think the future, it's hard to tell exactly the way it's going to go, but one thing I think we all agree on is that it's definitely bright. The talent pool is getting bigger. The companies coming here and growing roots are validating that fact. I think all of our, I think there's lots of room to grow, and I think there's lots of room for disruption and younger companies to come in and really make a name for themselves as well. I think there's a good core group of founders, C-suite execs, and investors that are genuinely interested in helping the next generation of startups. And I think that's, Vancouver is a big city, but it's not a massive city. And so I think with that middle ground that we've established, it's easy enough and quickly enough to connect to the right people. And as long as you're hungry and can communicate the vision, I think that there's going to be a lot more growth in the space, a lot more homegrown Martech companies, and lots of seal.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. I think we've talked a lot about the creativity of the province and the city. And oftentimes what comes with creativity is collaboration. And we also talked about that a lot too, is how approachable people tend to be in the industry. And I do believe that stems from the roots of creativity. Creativity, when you think about it, is a lot of brainstorming. It's a lot of getting together, it's whiteboarding, and it's fundamentally a very collective exercise. And I think anyone looking to start a company here, especially in the Martech space, is going to find that. Martech in particular is really interesting. It's been mentioned a few times, a legacy of success. Companies like Hootsuite and now Thinkific, which in many ways is a content marketing platform as well, spins out alumni. And especially in the spirit of Vancouver Startup Week, for many individuals who are looking to grow their companies or start their first startup, there's a lot of mentorship that's available. And a bit of parting wisdom, I guess, don't think of mentorship as you have to get a hold of Ryan Holmes or you have to get a hold of Vinny or Neve even. There's the first 30 employees at any company has seen that whole journey as well. So you're looking at who was part of the first 20, 30 people within Hootsuite. how do you get them within your network or as your mentors? So if you want mentorship and you want to know how Apple works, you don't need Steve Jobs. There's tons of people who've seen the inner workings of Apple. So I would encourage everyone to find mentors. There's tons of mentors that are available here, but not lock yourself into thinking that the superstars are the only mentors that are available in the city. Lots of early stage marketing managers, early stage engineers would be able to tell you a ton and teach you a lot and bring a lot of value to your company.
Great point. And yeah, I mean, that essentially brings us to the end here. So I just want to thank each of you for the time today, and hopefully our audience got a bit of insight into the Martech scene in BC.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to Switchboard PR for pulling together this great panel. And thank you to all of our attendees who were on today's session.